At the beginning of 1941, Heinrich Himmler gave the order to murder all Jews in the occupied Polish territories as part of Operation Reinhard. This action was named after Reinhard Heydrich, who had recently been tasked with the final solution to the Jewish question. Himmler appointed SS and police leader Odilo Globocnik as the main person responsible for carrying out these unprecedented mass murders. Globocnik then led the construction and commissioning of the Belzec F.E. Sobibor. In just 15 months, an estimated 1.6 to 1.8 million people were systematically gassed in these camps. It usually took less than 90 minutes between their arrival and their murder. The people were forcibly driven through the camp, straight to their destruction in the gas chambers. These actions were some of the most cruel and deadly crimes of the Nazi era. Globocnik was personally committed to sending as many people as possible to the extermination camps. Although he was described by other Nazi war criminals as exceptionally cold and cruel, a person who had no conscience. In addition to his involvement in the extermination camps, he was also involved in countless other massacres, brutally forced hundreds of thousands of Poles to relocate, and was later responsible for the murder of thousands of people in Italy. Odilo Globocnik, later often simply called Globus, was born on April 21, 1904 to Slovenian parents in Trieste, then part of Austria-Hungary. After the end of the First World War, he moved to Klagenfurt with his family and completed school there with his Abitur. Globocnik felt drawn to right-wing radical and anti-Semitic circles. In 1920, at the age of just 16, he joined the DNSAP, a radical Austrian party that emerged parallel to the German NSDAP and later partially merged into the Austrian NSDAP. In the following years, he was actively involved in propaganda for the right-wing movement in his country and was arrested a total of 5 times for political offenses and served several short prison sentences. In 1931, Globocnik officially joined the NSDAP and in 1934 the SS. Over the years, he became the main liaison between Hitler and the Nazis in Austria and was instrumental in creating a unified National Socialist movement throughout the country. In 1936, he took over the interim leadership of the Austrian NSDAP and was even invited by Hitler to the Bierthof in July of the same year to discuss further action in neighboring Germany. In March 1938, as part of the connection, the National Socialists took control of the Austrian territories, which were subsequently incorporated into the German Reich. Within a very short time, all anti-Semitic regulations were transferred to the annexed areas, and the Jewish population was systematically harassed and persecuted. They were forcibly dispossessed, deported abroad, or simply arbitrarily arrested and imprisoned. In the same year, several hundred Jews were murdered in the November pogroms, and 1,000 synagogues, as well as Jewish accommodation and shops, were destroyed. Subsequently, tens of thousands of Jews were deported to concentration camps throughout the German Reich, although many of them did not survive their imprisonment. Hitler personally appointed Odilo Globocnik Gauleiter of Vienna on May 24, 1938, and he was largely responsible for the subsequent expropriation, mistreatment, and expulsion of the local Jewish population. The newly appointed Vienna Gauleiter enjoyed little respect among his party colleagues. On the one hand, he was perceived as an extremely unpleasant person, and on the other hand, because of his non-Aryan surname Globocnik. Throughout his career, Odilo Globocnik was ridiculed by the German and international media because of his Slavic name. This ethnic group was particularly hated by the Nazis and was later systematically wiped out. Despite his Slavic surname, the convinced and highly racist National Socialist agitated against this population group and claimed that he did not belong to it. He always emphasized that his paternal grandfather was an Aryan who was culturally stabilized but retained his Germanic blood. This version was also supported by Himmler and Hitler himself. It can be assumed that Globocnik was only able to build a career within the Nazi government thanks to his good relationship with Himmler, which protected him from his numerous enemies. As Gauleiter of Vienna, he was involved in numerous machinations, including the misappropriation of party donations, embezzlement of large sums from Jewish citizens, and personal enrichment through looted property. At the end of January 1939, Globocnik was removed from his position and placed on probation in an S unit that had to take part in the attack on Poland on September 1, 1939. After the conquest of Poland, Himmler appointed his favorite SS and police leader of Lublin, giving him extensive powers. Under his leadership, numerous crimes and serious massacres were committed against the Polish population, to which hundreds of thousands of people fell victim. Immediately after taking office as the first police leader, he had forced labor camps set up for Jews, which over time became a large camp system in which numerous people died. In the course of the so-called Extraordinary Pacification Operation, also known as the AB Action, Globocnik's units murdered hundreds of Poles who were viewed as problematic by the Nazis, with such brutality that even party colleagues called them murder troops. On July 20, 1941, Globocnik was commissioned by Himmler to build the Majdanek concentration camp and to supervise its construction. Around 80,000 people were murdered in Majdanek from October 1941 to July 1944, with the camp being used at times as a pure extermination camp in which people were systematically gassed. After the successful establishment of the camp, Himmler commissioned Globocnik to murder all Jews in the occupied Polish territories and, at the beginning of 1942, appointed him head of Action Reinhardt, named after Reinhard Heydrich, who had recently been murdered. Globocnik first opened the Belzec extermination camp in March 1942, which, an existing work camp, was converted and equipped with several gas chambers. In Belzec, 434,000 people were murdered in just 10 months by December of the same year. The Sobibor extermination camp was opened in May 1942, where an estimated 150,000 to 250,000 people were gassed by October 1943. The exact number is still unknown today due to the extensive destruction of evidence by the SS. In July 1942, the Treblinka extermination camp, the deadliest of the 3 extermination camps within Operation Reinhard, was put into operation. By the end of 1943, over 900,000 people had been murdered there, second only to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Pit killings in the camps followed a similar pattern. People were brought into the camp in freight wagons and forced to move quickly using violence such as beatings or whips. People who were too weak to walk to the gas chambers were sorted out and shot shortly afterwards. The people who were to be murdered were taken to barracks where they had to undress and give up all their belongings. In addition, the women's hair was cut off for further. The victims were then driven in rows to the gas chambers, where they were constantly exposed to beatings from the guards and were forced to make the journey almost at a run. After the people were herded into the gas chambers and the doors were closed, an internal combustion engine generated exhaust gases and led them into the chamber. The victim's agony was long and particularly painful, often lasting longer than 10. The corpses then had their gold teeth removed before they were buried in subsequent mass graves. It usually took less than 90 minutes from the time the person arrived until they were murdered. Odilo Globocnik was largely responsible for the implementation, and in particular, for the unprecedented number of victims of 1.6 to 1.8 million people in Action Reinhard. With great persistence, he lobbied Himmler and other greats to murder as many Jews as possible, and, for example, also ensured that people who worked in factories important to the war effort were gassed. Eyewitnesses reported that Globocnik was extremely proud and happy when he toured the camps or talked about the efficiency of the murdered people. He thanked Himmler several times for this unique opportunity and that all of his secret wishes had come true with even other hardened accomplices in the concentration camps were sometimes frightened by Globocnik. The longtime commandant of Auschwitz, Rudolf Haas, later reported the following about him. He wanted to destroy the Jews immediately on the spot if he didn't need them for work, take their property to large collection camps, and evaluate them for the SS. He said in a comfortable, conversational tone in his Viennese dialect at night by the fireplace, as if it were the most harmless stories. While I was always struggling with Eichmann and was able to slow down the transport of Jews to Auschwitz, Globocnik didn't want to because he really wanted to come along at the forefront of its destructions and its captured values. Odilo Globocnik was not just a recipient of orders and an executor of Himmler's instructions, but was largely responsible for the implementation of the Holocaust in Poland through his own activism and numerous suggestions to his superiors. There are even individual historians who suspect that the basic idea for the Reinhard operation could have come from him, and that he was able to convince Himmler of it. However, this cannot be proven. Under Globocnik's leadership, and as part of the Smolensk operation, more than 100,000 Polish people were forcibly relocated, with a further 50,000 people being deported to construction and extermination camps, where they were mostly murdered. At the end of November 1942, dozens of villages in the region of the same name were forcibly evacuated in a night and dagger operation, and the residents were driven to a collection camp, where countless people were killed or shot. The displaced persons were then divided into several groups. All people under the age of 14 or over 60 were transported directly to the extermination camps and gassed there, while those able to work were used as forced laborers in Germany. People who resisted were deported to Auschwitz as so-called asocials. These resettlement actions led to great resistance among the Polish population against the German occupiers and enormously destabilized the occupied zone. After Operation Reinhardt was largely completed and the Lublin district was in a chaotic state due to the resettlement measures, Globocnik was assigned to Italy in September 1943 and appointed senior SS police leader of the so-called Adriatic Coastal Operation Zone. Here, too, he had the Jewish population mercilessly persecuted, and a total of over 1,100 people deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Towards the end of the war, Odilo Globocnik fled to Austria and was on the run for. He was arrested by British troops on May 31, 1945, along with other high-ranking SS members, and subsequently interrogated. After his first questioning, he committed suicide using a cyanide capsule. His body was then buried anonymously in a. Odilo Globocnik was a key figure and driving force behind the Holocaust carried out in Polish territory. With enthusiasm and conviction, he systematically murdered almost 2 million people. For him, there could never be enough people who were deported to his extermination camps. Globocnik is without a doubt one of the cruelest and greatest mass murderers of the Nazi era. At the same time, relatively few people know him today, which encourages me to create more videos about this person. Please like and share this video, and write me in the comments if you like my videos.